Film Club.
Andy,
Hello.
why are you like this? We're here to talk about Fight Club from David Fincher. Probably one of David Fincher's best films.
Most notable, and surprisingly, one of the ones we've never done.
And what's it most notable for?
Fight Club is most notable for the just absolute sheer madness, characterization, and that scene where he just starts hitting himself, throwing himself around the office, going, please don't, please don't, please don't. Because everyone knows Fight Club, has referenced it in any time forward a form, and it's just a brilliant film.
Joe, can you pronounce the guy's name that wrote the original book for Fight Club?
I can't.
So it's Chuck Palahniuk. I'm sorry, I guarantee you the surname of that is destroyed, but it's destroyed. Let's move on. We'll fix it later.
I didn't know it was actually based off a novel. Which is actually interesting because one of the scenes that I was quite happy about is when Edward Norton's character is on about the furniture. He has an IKEA catalogue and you go around the room and it labels everything. It reminded me so much of the intro scene of American Psycho when he's on about the skincare routine. And again, you got two kind of characters who are not quite there, that have their own troubles and everything about there. And the film is just pure chaos and violence. And it's quite interesting how many similarities are between them both.
Well, do you want another funny little story behind the origins of Fight Club as a concept?
Go on.
So the writer, Chuck, he was on a camping trip.
Oh, right.
And when he was on this camping trip, I think he said someone was making too much noise. He went over, asked him to turn it down. They beat him up. And when he went to work the next day, he was cut, he was bruised. No one asked him about it. So he had this weird realization that people don't necessarily, at least your colleagues, don't necessarily want to like push too hard. They don't want to know too much. So that's where the concept of the Underground Fight Club came from, and this sort of people wandering around being all beaten up and bruised and no one really saying anything about it.
Yeah, because it takes quite later in the film where his boss actually says, no, you're a mess. You don't wear a tie anymore. Do it up, and that's obviously where that scene leads to, where he's beating himself up. And it's quite interesting how far through the film, I think it would get to about maybe an hour and a half, an hour and a quarter, until this scene happens. And the amount of time he goes back into work, and yes, progressively he's getting more and more lax and just doesn't care, but somehow he's still in a job for an insurance sort of thing. One of the most boring characters becomes one of the most interesting, which I think it's a great performance by Ed Norton. I
think it's one of Ed Norton's best, to be fair, along with Brad Pitt.
Well, this is it. So this is it. You talk about one and you talk about the other, and I feel actually, that's the whole point of the film. The two characters are kind of the antithesis of each other, just as the acting more or less is. You got Brad Pitt with his maniacal laughter. You got Ed Norton with his straight edge, like, why are we doing this? Almost a bit sheepish, but at the same time a bit strict, and something you'd expect like your dad to be. When they're all running around, it's like, what you doing? But equally, you've got just like one of my favorite scenes is at the end where he's just talking to them and he's bossing them away. It's just after when everyone's if you haven't seen this film, you don't know about this. It's after he shot himself, and he almost just owns that role. He becomes like an amalgamation of both of them, which I've just So, do we talk about the point the big, what's it called?
The twist, because Fight Club has one of the most iconic twists in cinema.
Yeah.
And typically all Film Club episodes are going to be like spoiler filled. We never really sort of hold back on spoilers. Occasionally when something's big and important, you do want to give people a heads up. So if you haven't seen Fight Club for some reason, please do go and watch it. It's a wonderful film. There's loads of interesting stuff to it. But the thing that everybody always wants to talk about straight away is the twist.
Yeah. And it's quite interesting because when you're going about twists in the film, Darth Vader is a great example of one.
What's the twist with Darth Vader?
He's a Jedi. Well, technically. But the twist in this is not actually that mentioned quite a lot. Everyone loves Fight Club because of its craziness of it. And yes, the twist is there, and people do mention the twist, but when you go in the top 10 twists of all time, you don't actually see Fight Club that often in it.
Do you go through lists of top 10 twists of all time?
It's like Watch Mojo's and stuff like that. Do you know what I mean? It's on there, and you never normally see Fight Club, but for everyone who's seen Fight Club, and the majority of people have, and the majority of people know about it, is the twist is one of the biggest factors. And what makes this so good is rewatching it again. And it is so brilliant. And I've not seen this in about 3 or 4 years, maybe even longer. And I was going through it, just imagining, having known the twist, thinking, that's so cool how they've kind of compensated for that.
So just to clarify for everybody, last chance, last spoiler warning. The twist is Tyler Durden, Brad Pitt, isn't a real person.
No, he's like the alter personality, a figment of Ed Norton's imagination.
Yeah, the narrator who goes throughout the film without being named.
Which is a little subtly to add on. I actually really like that as a twist, as a minor twist. I think it's really great when you go through a film and you don't actually know the main character's, protagonist's name, but you are you follow the character and you're so invested in their story. And it's like at the end of the film, well, do you even know my name? And I find that so cool. But yeah, so the same person, and obviously as he come to the scenes we mentioned about, from the end where he's just shot himself, which is brilliant, by the way, because he throughout the whole film is subservient to Brad Pitt, to Tyler, and then that scene he kind of owns him. He's like, "Do you really want to do this?" He was like, "You see, I've got my eyes open." Is that his quote?
Yeah. Can I give you a fun fact about the ending?
Go on.
So, are you aware that recently, this is I think a couple of years ago, Fight Club was released on a Chinese streaming service. I think it was owned by Tencent, and they changed the ending.
What?
Yeah. Do you know what they changed the ending to?
Go on.
So it all plays out exactly as it was. I'm not sure if there's additional alterations to the film, but at the end, when Ed Norton's character shoots himself, he sits there and then a title card comes up. And the title card reads, "Through the clues provided by Tyler, the police rapidly figured out the whole plan and arrested all criminals, successfully preventing the bomb from exploding.
No way.
After trial, Tyler was sentenced to a lunatic asylum, receiving psychological treatment. He was discharged from the hospital in 2012.
What?
Yeah.
So they just scrapped the whole kind of anti-capitalism, but the whole point of the film is starting afresh. It's about not, you don't be a slave to the system. And oh my god, that's insane.
Yep, I know. I mean, it's actually somewhat closer to the ending of the book, where Tyler, where the narrator, wakes up in hospital after the fact. And he has a sort of, I think he has like a confession or a discussion with God. Not literally. I think he has sort of like a in his prayers and his thoughts, discusses it with God. But yeah, I think I imagine the change there is just China driven. They're very fond of making sure that you know about the strength and the good that the establishment does for them.
Yeah, very very authority.
Yeah,
driven. That's interesting.
So I do want to point a couple things out about this film. It's obviously directed by David Fincher. Really, this is the film, right, that properly launched Fincher's career. I think he was going to be on a pretty good trajectory anyway. But I always think that Fight Club is the one that stapled him in the pantheon.
It's the one I recognize his name as a director from. Yeah.
Yep. At the time, he was doing a lot of collaboration, and actually still does kind of with his cinematographer, who's Jeff Cronenweth. He's done stuff like Social Network, Gone Girl, Girl with a Dragon Tattoo.
All right, okay.
Fun little fact about him. He's the son of the cinematographer that David Fincher originally worked with for Alien 3. Jordan Cronenweth.
I didn't know that Fincher did Alien 3.
Yeah, did you not?
No.
That's his first feature.
No way.
We'll do it eventually because it's an awful car crash of a film. But like, it's a lot of interesting story behind it with Fincher. But yeah, his dad was the one that started shooting that film before he had to drop out.
How come he had to drop out?
I believe it was Parkinson's.
It's nice that his son went on to do his father's legacy.
Yeah, and look how astoundingly well he takes it on. The film's beautiful.
Oh, it is, but at the same time, it's like it captures that essence of depression and darkness and everything so well. It's so dingy and grungy. I mean,
it's dirty and it's wet.
Yeah, but look at the house. Look at the house that they live at. And they're sitting on the books, and even just the narrator even describes what the house is like and just how water's seeping through everywhere. So the narrator mentions about how dingy the house is. The costume design is particularly good as well. Look at the outfits Tyler wears. Look at the outfits that Marla wears. Look at what she looks like when she first enters the kind of conventions, testicular cancer conventions, when she's in the church just smoking away. Brilliant use of cinematography and costume, and it's just so depressing.
I don't think that necessarily like a depressing atmosphere is what they're going for, but it's this anti-establishment sort of rage against the machine approach. The film's very much like about being anti-establishment and waking up a little bit, but then also the indoctrination that comes from approaching that too heavily. Like, I love the fact that this film is sort of, at first, it's very anti-establishment, wake up, stop being just a mass consumer without any thought process or emotional connection. Because really, the film's trying to preach the importance of social interaction and deep connection with people. But I love that it's not just one note. It's not just tearing something down and sort of pointing at it and going, look, you don't need these things. You're better off without them. It's tearing it down, but then also giving you the warning of like, be wary because other people are going to prey on that once you start tearing down these establishments. And you have to be an individual. You have to be able to like see the extreme at one end, see the extreme at the other end, and to be a real free individual, you have to sit in the middle.
Yeah, and I think a really great example of that is when the narrator just beats the hell out of the blonde guy. And what does he say? He just said, he says to Tyler, I just had a lot of things. I just need to see need to knock the beauty out of something.
Where'd you go, psycho boy?
I felt like destroying something beautiful.
Now, just to check, are you aware who the blonde guy is?
Yeah, Jared Leto.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Don't we all? It's just wonderful these days to see Jared Leto get the shit kicked out of him.
I completely agree with you. Completely agree. On the same note of sub-characters, Meatloaf does an exceptional job as Bob. I didn't know until a couple of years ago that this was Meatloaf in that role.
Did you not?
No, because it was when my partner was going about the Pick of Destiny and Meatloaf plays Jack Black's father. And I was like, oh, yeah, Meatloaf, he's in quite a few films. I forgot about that. Lo and behold, he's in Fight Club. Lo and behold, he's Bob. And I was like, no way. Then I saw it again where the narrator's crying into Bob's breasts. And I was like, oh my God. And Meatloaf's got the voice like this. And I was just like, brilliant. Absolutely. I have so much time for that.
I always think it's so funny that they make a whole thing about the fact that one of the rules of Fight Club, right? No shirts, no shoes. But Bob can't have no shirt because obviously Meatloaf is wearing the fat suit. So he has to have the shirt on.
Yeah, it's very true. And do you know what's quite interesting as well? Jared Leto's character never shaves his head.
Yeah, good point. I wonder why.
Everyone has to shave their head. Yeah, I did wonder about that. But maybe it's because he was like, needed to get the shit kicked out of him. Interesting, the music's quite subtle. There are moments, and I think a really good example of a good score is when it just happens and you don't realise it and it kind of sets the tone even more. However, there was a couple of moments I noticed throughout the film where you just had these drones and these kind of like, we were talking about the anti-establishment area of the film, you know, the dark, dingy nature of it. It's done by the Dust Brothers, who I actually haven't heard of before. Have you?
I haven't. I was reading about this because, if am I right in thinking Fincher wanted to work with someone else first?
Okay.
I believe that someone else was Trent Reznor.
Which makes sense. That's the kind of work he would do. Like things like Social Network, stuff like that.
I could be mixing it up with Tom York.
Okay. Again, similar kind of theme, you know, that kind of industrial dinginess of his. Yeah. I can see the theme he's going for. I feel like the Dust Brothers did a great job.
Because I'm probably thinking about the fact that he went on to work with Trent Reznor, with the Social Network and
Atticus, Trent Reznor and Atticus Finch?
No, Atticus Finch is from
Atticus
Killer Mockingbird.
It is, in Social Network and any others? They must have. So I did find that, as I said though, it wasn't too noticeable. It wasn't something like Toy Story where, you know, it's Randy Newman where it jumps out at you and you got these songs that right through. It's one of those where it just plays in the background so subtly. Very similar to Drive.
I want to see one of these scenes where like they're in the Fight Club, but over the top of it is Randy Newman's "You Got a Friend in Me."
You got a friend in me. You got a friend in me.
Well, I suppose you do, don't you?
So, do you want a little bit of a budgetary fact?
Go on.
Are you aware this film, when it came out, was a minor flop?
No.
So the budget for
Is this a cult classic?
In a way, it is. 1999. 65 million. That's not much for a film of this sort of scope. And it made, in its theatrical run, 100 million. So, general rule of thumb that we have today is that if you take a budget and then you also add in marketing and distribution, you want to double before you're really breaking a profit. Now, at the time, this was a little bit of a smaller cost because there was no sort of particular big stars. I guess to be fair, Brad Pitt and Edward Norton were doing pretty well at the time. In fact, Brad Pitt was paid, I believe, 17.5 million for his role. Then Ed Norton only picked up 2.5 million.
And it's quite funny because normally Ed Norton is quite a troublesome person to work with.
This was before he had that reputation, though, I think.
Know that. Okay.
So it made 100 million, which is a little bit below what they wanted. I believe that pretty much covered the cost. It wasn't considered a massive flop.
Yeah.
But then when it hit DVD sales, home release, it did insane numbers. I think the original number was 13 million DVDs, which is huge. When you've basically covered all your costs just with your theatrical,
Yeah.
all that DVD is just like profit on top.
Yeah, that's interesting. No, I didn't know that at all. Kind of, to use your words, segueing into the format of DVD, but in this case, projector. What I really love about this film, and again, what's brilliant upon the rewatch, this is a film that, as crazy as it is, it gets so much better the rewatch. And I think a lot of people mention this, but it is fantastic the rewatch. There are a few others that are similar that are just great. Anyway, the subliminal messaging of this film. And I completely forgot about that scene in the projector room. What I love is how, there's the narrator explaining to you, Tyler doing his little bit to explain, cutting up the film. You're talking about the burn mark in the top right corner. And then he goes and puts his own image on the family film. And you see the horrors of the families realizing but not realizing the subliminal message of scene of a penis. What's really interesting is how this film does the same to you. And for those who know Fight Club, they'll know that you'll see it throughout, but you will see images, and I think the famous one is Tyler in the office, but you'll see images of Tyler flash up then and go. It kind of lends itself into that rewatch. It lends itself into the idea that he is a figment of the imagination. He's not real, because why would someone flash up on the screen like that? It's fantastic. It's one of the things I think is kind of underappreciated about this film, but it's so respectful.
It is. I think on rewatch, those individual frames of Brad Pitt stand out so much to me. Like, they're very, very obvious. But I remember watching it the first time, and I was quite young the first time I watched it. I didn't pick up on those at all.
No, that's what I mean. So it's so good on the rewatch.
I really wish that I could reset my brain somehow and see if I'd noticed them.
On the first time, yeah.
Because I think
I suppose we're now we're older, we're a bit more conscious when we watch a film, aren't we? So do we...
Especially when you've done some editing as well, you start to notice this stuff. One of the things that people...
Or you might think, is it a mistake from the...
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. I'm always on the lookout for individual frames of black. Because often when you make a gap, and anyone who edits will know this, right? When you leave a gap somewhere.
That happened with me a few times in editing Film Club.
Happens to us all at some point. And I just wonder if I could catch it now, but now they're so obvious that it's clearly there. There's tons of stuff that they do that's fun though with Tyler Durden, where like he walks past a mirror and he doesn't have a reflection.
Oh shit! Yeah, good point. I forgot about that.
He and Ed Norton
I didn't see that on this watch.
have the same briefcase and stuff.
Yeah,
like
that was the first one, wasn't it? And then obviously you got the mark on the hand, which is quite early. Which when you're first watching the film, you think, all right, that's just a sign of Tyler's kind of cult. But later on, you realize, and it helps that the other members have the same mark and everything. But then you realize later on that he does it himself, and it's horrifying to go back to that scene and see the narrator do it to himself. It's that's probably the most gruesome scene for me. That
I agree. I think it's pretty brutal. So there's tons of little bits and pieces they had that was very, very fourth wall breaky, very fun. It's a sort of thing that like Fincher didn't really pursue after this very much, and I think that's what makes it a little bit more special in his filmography. It makes it stand out because like he didn't continue doing a bunch of like cheeky, clever jokes or cheeky sort of like inserted references that you get on multiple watches with the rest of his films. It's what makes Fight Club stand out a little bit more from the rest of his work.
Well, it's interesting because, as I said, this is probably my first introduction to Fincher's work. My latest watch of Fincher's work is the unfortunately cancelled Mindhunter, which is outstanding. It's absolutely phenomenal bit of work, and it's quite a bit different. It's heavily different to what we're watching here, in fact. And it's mad how versatile he is as a director, because he said, that doesn't have any quirks, it doesn't have anything. It's very straightforward, it's very subtle, and it's very concise in what it wants to tell, the story it wants to tell. Whereas Fight Club is just mad.
It is. I do recommend that if anybody, for some reason, you're still at this point in the video and you haven't yet watched it, please go watch it. It's wonderful. We've probably just ruined every element of it for you.
But they get the opportunity to watch that and keep an eye out for those moments and again, it's so good in a rewatch that it was I'm really glad we did this.
Yep, absolutely. So there is Fight Club. You can let us know in the comments below what you thought of Fight Club. It's our first episode back. So next week, Andy, we're going to return to the original scheduled release that was meant to be released about a year ago, in terms of if you're keeping up with Film Club lore. But it was meant to be released about a year ago. So next week, we'll be taking a look at the Meyerowitz stories.
We are indeed. So enjoy yourself and good to be back.